Welcome to Aligned AF, real talk for evolving souls with Yahweh Kent. Join Yahweh for honest conversations on spiritual growth, the messiness of life, and how to move through it all at a higher frequency. So grab a cup of tea and let's sail in. This is Aligned AF, and here's Yahweh.
There's a subtle, almost invisible weight many of us carry. The quiet burden of the word should. I should be further along. I should be stronger by now. I should do what's expected of me. These shoulds sound reasonable on the surface, but underneath, they often carry the residue of someone else's rules, old conditioning, and societal scripts that were never really ours. They become a fence around our possibility, keeping us in familiar pastures while our souls ache to run wild. But here's the beautiful, radical truth. Every time we release a should, we create open space, fertile ground where a could can take root. Could is curiosity, expansion, potential. Could asks the question, what if the life I want is not only possible, but waiting for me to say yes? Shifting from should to could is more than just a mindset tweak. It's a spiritual act of reclaiming our agency, honoring our truth, and aligning with the future our soul knows we're here to have. Today's guest, Stephanie Redfeather, knows this transformation intimately. From her years in the Air Force and a career as an engineer and financial planner, she walked a path steeped in structure, achievement, and practicality. But when the whispers of spirit grew louder, she had the courage to step beyond what she should and become and delve into what she could become. A Reiki master, shamanic minister, author whose work is awakening empaths around the world. Her book, The Evolutionary Empath, is a guide for sensitives ready to claim their role in humanity's awakening. And her empath activation cards is an oracle deck that is both artistic and a vibrational tool for transformation. Together, we'll explore what it means to dismantle the shoulds in our lives and open to the coulds, and trust the possibilities that emerge when we step into our authentic frequency. Today's episode is Releasing the Should to Make Space for the Coulds. Hey everybody, and welcome back to Aligned AF, Real Talk for the Evolving Soul. I am Yahweh, and I am excited to have you all with me here today. I've been looking forward to this episode for a while now because I get to spend some time with my dear friend who is far too far away from me geographically, Stephanie Redfeather. Reverend Dr. Stephanie Redfeather is a divine feminine change agent and a champion of empaths. A multi-award-winning author of the international bestseller, The Evolutionary Empath, and Empath Activation Cards. Her passion is to help fellow sensitive souls break out of energetic jail and become co-creators of New Earth consciousness. As a shamanic minister, workshop facilitator, telesummit producer, and prolific creator of spiritual tools, Stephanie has helped thousands to connect with their sacred selves and heal their human wounds. Stephanie is the founder of Blue Star Temple, an online resource for spiritual seekers who learn energetic skills, hone empathic abilities, access spiritual knowledge, and connect with cosmic consciousness. Stephanie holds a bachelor's degree in mathematics and a master's and doctorate in shamanic studies. She's also an award-winning artist and contributing author to 4 other #1 best-selling books. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Yahweh. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's so good to see you. I'm excited about this one because um, we've had your book and we play around with your cards all the time. They're usually sitting on the counter or the kitchen table for a card pull during the day sometime. And of course, you know my wife, so she's pulling cards all the time and trying to encourage us to do it as well. She loves to get Orion involved in that. Orion, let's pull a card, and he gets excited too. So thank you for sharing that gift with the world. Stephanie, would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself personally, and then possibly pulling a card to maybe set intention for today's show?
Yeah, absolutely. So the sharing of self is always what feels relevant in the moment, because I have a long and storied life that
Yeah.
kind of looks like two different people lived it.
Uh-huh.
So, but I am currently living on 3 acres in Wentzville, Missouri, outside of St. Louis, and I've been going through a big death and rebirth process, as many of us do multiple times in our lives. And so what I'm really moving towards is just greater joy, creating and living and loving from a place of following my bliss,
Yeah.
following, the when we were talking before the show, figuring out what we wanted to focus on, going from the shoulds to the coulds, it is really what I am smack dab in the middle of. And
Yeah.
so I'm creating art and visioning this next level of my business and what wants to come through. So I would love to pull a card. So I've got my deck here, and I'll just call in something that is relevant to the collective, since we have many different souls who are partaking of this at the moment. Ah, beautiful. Natural rhythms and cycles. And so what I can tell you about this card is most of us, having grown up in the Western world with a very patriarchal influence, right, that emphasizes productivity, make it happen. It's very left brain. It's a very linear kind of world that we are
Yeah.
raised in,
Yeah.
that tends to elevate things that are, masculine, archetypally left brain, which then brings things out of balance. And so anything that is related to the archetypal feminine or the right brain then gets devalued. And so these natural rhythms and cycles are actually a huge part of the world that we live in. If you talk to old farmers, if you look at indigenous cultures, they are tracking the cycles of the moon, the cycles of the sun. They are deeply in relationship with the earth and with the natural rhythms and cycles of the planet and of the seasons. And, we can extend that further into our own bodies, being in resonance instead of dissonance with our own rhythms and cycles. We can't always be on. We can't always be
Yeah.
productive and output and all of that sort of thing. So we have to listen to our own drawing inward in periods of rest. And so that's what this card is really, really asking all of us to do, is to tune back into the natural rhythms and cycles of our own body, of our own spirit, and of our energy, and of the greater community and planet that we live in.
Yeah. Yeah. And to not only listen to those signals, those messages, but to embrace them and act on them. We can listen to them over and over and over again, but then if we cast them aside, we're still doing the same thing we've always been doing.
Right.
Yeah. Wonderful. Wonderful. I know that that speaks strongly. Growing up in the 60s and 70s as a young man, and a certain archetype that you're expected to live up to. You have, expectations. Don't cry, they'll think you're a baby, and be the man of the house, and make sure that you're always doing this and make sure you're always doing that. So later in life, that's a lot to try to let go of. When I start embracing, my wife tells me that I've got a really decent balance of the masculine and feminine. But man, that took a long time to not only do the work to balance that out, but just to accept it in myself.
Absolutely. You know, for me as a woman, there's this sort of subtle messaging of to live and operate in a man's world, you have to out masculine the masculine.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and so it's an abandonment of self to, you know, to play the game, if you will, to operate in what you think is the world and the way that it works.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you've got so much to offer from the divine feminine side of things. But if you have to be in the masculine to even get heard, well, then what's really happening here?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the masculine is prefers to hear it through the filter as opposed to the pureness of what the divine feminine really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is those I have since my spiritual awakening, which was really, it was multiple things, but one of those big pieces was a reclamation of my own feminine.
Yeah.
And so I have been walking with that inner marriage relationship, developing it, understanding it, deepening it for, God, 25 years now.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. When we start looking at the shoulds and the coulds in our lives, can you maybe in your own words kind of describe what you see as the real deep cost of living by shoulds instead of by coulds?
Yeah. Yeah, there is a slow erosion of trust in yourself. And it's, if you're familiar with the boiling frog parable.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So for those who don't know, if you put a frog in boiling water, it's going to immediately register that, this hurts, this is dangerous, I want out of here. Yeah. Whereas if you put a frog in tepid water and slowly increase the temperature, the change is so gradual that it's imperceptible, the frog doesn't notice, and it cooks to death.
Yeah.
And so that's how it is for so many of us. You know, we are often, unless we have a very unique and unusual childhood, at least at this point in human development or human consciousness, that we will often, you know, take on our coping mechanisms. We have, you know, subconscious programming, indoctrination, things we internalize. We have wounds that we maybe not even be aware of that are not yet healed. And so all of these things kind of build the way in which we engage in the world. And oftentimes we're living from those coulds. So it's not an authentic expression of who we are. It is run through the filter of, will this get me love? Will this get my needs met? Will this make me what I think happy means? Right. Will this please my parents? Will this give me status? You know, whatever all of those things are. And so it's like, if you're, you know, a bricklayer, let's say, and you're building a long wall and you have your straight line, let's say you've got 2 stakes and a rope so that you can keep your wall straight. If you start to veer off from that right when you start, right where that first stake is, the difference between the straight line and the wall is maybe just a millimeter or 2. But if you continue on that path, right, the distance between where you should, I don't like that term, but I can't think of something better, where you know, what's the true line of what is, you know, where the building is designed to be versus where the wall ended up going,
right,
is a massive separation. And so I use that to illustrate that over time, you know, in the beginning, we can't really tell there's much dissonance there. Yeah. It feels like we're doing what we're supposed to do, but over time, there's this divergence, and eventually our system can no longer tolerate the level of dissonance that's inside of us.
Yeah.
Because living from the goods.
Yeah, I think
Sure.
we can see that, especially with the way things are in the world and especially in our country right now. Yeah. So how do you personally recognize when a should is making fear or conditioning rather than genuine inner guidance?
That has been a multi-decade process of getting to know myself.
Mm-hmm.
When my spiritual awakening began, I didn't know how to listen to myself. I didn't know what that inner voice sounded like. I had sort of snipped off all of the connection to that part of myself, and so it was, reconnecting all of these parts of myself again so that I could listen. And so, having spent a lot of time learning how to listen to myself and discovering how my inner self, how my spirit, how my heart, how my, the intelligence of my being, not my mind, but my embodied self speaks to me. It's how it feels in my body, and so how it feels
Yeah.
is going to be different than other people, but it's not a mental activity, it's a feeling activity. And it could be, it could be a tightening in my gut, it could be sometimes it's so subtle it's hard to put words to, but I have just learned to recognize when something isn't in resonance here. I'm feeling heaviness, or I'm feeling a fear or something. There's something that needs to be spoken to here. Oftentimes I don't know what it is. I get the feeling first, and I've come to recognize it. I'm like, okay, I need to take a moment, acknowledge it, be with myself, say, okay, I feel you. What are you? What is this? And then I will make space for it to come fully into consciousness. And um, almost always then I will get clarity about what it is.
Yeah.
But that is a process that I've spent 25 years honing. So
Sure.
what it looks like for me now is not what it looked like 25 years ago.
So let's go back 25 years, and for those out there listening that maybe are just mired in the shoulds in their lives and aren't sure what to listen for, or aren't sure what steps they can actually take to make a change. What's one or two small steps that would help them recognize the goods in their lives and maybe take one conscious step forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the beginning it is practicing your awareness, or your mindfulness, or your consciousness, however you want to describe that, of just recognizing in the moment something feels heavy. This doesn't feel good. It feels, one of the comparisons or filters that I use often is, does this make you contract, or does this make you expand, right? So if whatever you're deciding or thinking about doing, or maybe there's something you said yes to and you're having regrets, if there's a collapse, if there's a heaviness, then that's probably a very good sign that it is not in resonance, because what is in resonance is going to make you feel more open, expanded, lighter, to engage with it. So I think one of the first things to do and to cultivate is a practice of giving yourself the space to explore, to be with, to invite whatever that is to come forward. Because I think for so many of us, it's just like, a fly, a mosquito, just go away.
Yeah.
Until I got stuff to do.
Yeah. Where'd that thought come from?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So so you talk about feeling constricted versus feeling expanded. Now, aren't there incidences where somebody is stuck in the mire, and just the idea of expanding, just the idea of thinking or acting in a different way than what they're used to can feel constricting?
Yes.
And how do you tell the difference between those?
Exactly. Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up. You don't always know. I mean, I'll just be honest. There were times when I just didn't know, and I would just sit in a big puddle of fear and doubt and self-questioning and all of that. Resistance does not always mean no. That was a big thing that I had to learn. And so that phenomenon you're talking about, I call resistance.
Okay.
And so, it's fear, it's worry, it's the unknown, it's the what are people going to think. But resistance is not an immediate no to whatever it is you're considering. Resistance is an invitation to look deeper and ask yourself, why does this feel? What is this about? Is there some inner voice that's telling me that, it's that exploration where we have to go inside and look at the foundational pieces that are informing that feeling.
Yeah.
And it's not always going to be an elegant, clean, easy process.
Right.
I
In
wish I
fact, in
could-
most cases, it won't be.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it feels important to share also that, because this is a concept that I talk about with a lot of clients, and that is we are used to it. We have been encouraged after 12 years of school and the sort of Western mind way of thinking is that everything is an intellectual activity. Everything can be solved by the brain.
Yep.
Well, the left side specifically, which is the very rational, practical, logical side of ourselves. And so it doesn't work to apply that kind of linear expectation, like this, all right, do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 in order, and you will have transformation. Voila! Because what's happening is not linear. It is in a non-linear space.
Yeah.
It is a mixture. It's kind of a big swirling sort of thing. And so the left brain really wants that formula. Just give me these steps and I will apply it. But when you realize that doesn't work, there's actually a freedom that is created because, and this is the piece I tell my clients, it doesn't matter where you start. Because everything, because usually what happens is, people are not usually what happens. When people are hitting this dissonance and it's really vibrating their life, there's usually a crisis of some sort. And so in that sort of experience, there's usually multiple things getting triggered. Do I work on my relationship with my spouse first, or do I take care of this thing with my job, or do I heal this wound from childhood? Which thing do I focus on first? And my answer is yes.
Yeah.
Because they're all related. And in this non-linear, sort of outside of ordinary time and space place where all of this lives, it's all connected. It doesn't matter which thing you start with. One's going to lead to the other, because they're all connected. And so I feel like there's freedom in that, because it's not, it releases you from there's a right answer or a right way to begin.
Right. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we could come upon all of this without a crisis, without something horrible happening in my life that, everybody's like, oh, you haven't hit rock bottom yet. I don't want to. I want to understand it now,
Yes.
So you've lived in what seemed to be like polar opposite worlds throughout your life, from Air Force, engineering, financial planning, and then over on the other hand, you've got Reiki master and shamanic minister and working with empaths. Is there anything that you could say helped you in those more rigid, more structured aspects of life? Anything from there that kind of helped you where you're at today?
Yeah. It is, when I teach on, the archetypal masculine and feminine energies, I always make a very clear point that one is not better than the other. We're not trying to vilify one or say one is bad. They are completely different sets of qualities, and they are both needed. But often what happens is we will, at least for a period of time, live our lives from one set way more than the other. And so I started out, I was a very creative, intuitive child. I went to creative and performing arts school, like the TV show Fame, if anybody remembers that.
Yeah.
And then you fast forward a few years and I get a math degree and become an Air Force officer. And it's like, one of these things is not like the other. And so it's like, what the hell happened there in the middle? And so, as I look back on all of that, of course, you have the luxury of the perspective of time in looking back. But I wouldn't be who I am without those experiences, right? That structure is necessary at times. That ability to analyze and to, I'm going to be very careful in saying push yourself, right? There are times where you need to kind of get the pry bar under your butt and do a thing. But then there's also times, to where you need to be gentle. You need to give yourself a break. You need to allow yourself permission to live in the unknown and to sort of be in the chaos, because chaos is the birthplace of creativity and new solutions.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. It just even in a spiritual journey, you need a kick in the ass every once in a while. You do.
Yeah.
So was there a specific moment in your structured life where you realized this is not what my soul wants anymore?
It came in stages, and I laugh because I tell people I have 4 planets in Scorpio, so I can't help myself. I can be a little bit hard-headed and like, I can be like a dog with a bone. Like I'm gonna do this thing, and by God, and I'm gonna shove that square peg in that round hole. So I've had to.
And for your own good, don't put your hand near me.
Yeah, and so yeah, there's a kind of a lot to unpack there. Redirect me, because all of a sudden my brain just went.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Can you give us one moment where you said, this structured life isn't working for me?
Yeah. I feel like it was actually a moment of grace where I was in the Air Force for almost 10 years. In my last assignment, I started getting these sort of internal nudges, like this feeling that it was time to get out.
Okay.
It was never my intention to stay in for 20 years and retire. It was always, I'm going to stay in until it makes sense to me. And I'm really amazed that I listened to that and it kind of unfolded the way that it did, because that was not a skill that I worked with or used frequently or relied upon. But it just felt like, okay, it's time to get out. And it wasn't, hey, I know what I'm going to do next. It's time to separate from the military. It was, hey, it's time to get out. Now what am I going to do? What next? But that was definitely a nudging. And so I thought, that my next career in financial planning is what I would do for the next 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
And I spent over a year preparing for it, interviewing to get the position, studying to be able to sell insurance and securities, blah, 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 get my business set up. And I quit in less than 6 months because I hated it. And I lost about $25,000 because I didn't stay in long enough to recoup what I invested. But it was so, I can see clearly now, I understand the signs, but at the time I did not, that it was, my soul was just like, honey, no, my love, this is not it for you. This is not it. But I fought, I resisted, I drug, kicking and screaming and fingernails, clawing, because I had no ability to transition like that with any amount of grace.
Right. Wow. Yeah, plus the old conditioning must have been saying, I've spent all this time, I've spent all this money. This has got to work.
Yes, yes. Yeah, yeah. And you know, what I was taught basically in the financial planning company that I was with is there was kind of a formula, right? Here's how you
Sure.
get more clients, and here's how you execute this, that, and the other thing. And it was this very, you know, again, masculine left brain of, if it's not working, just do it more and harder. And it's like that my system was just so completely exhausted and fatigued from that way of living.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh. Oh. Um, let's talk a little bit about some of the stuff that's in your book.
Yeah.
You write about the empath's role in humanity's awakening. Okay, so how do you see that role evolving over the next decade?
Yeah.
Like with what's going on now, how is an empath's role going to support humanity?
Mm-hmm. It is simple and complex, as with all things. The simple answer is, I believe that empaths are here to help humanity ascend to the next level of consciousness. We are, you know, you, me, so many of us who are incarnating now in the probably the past close to 100 years. Like 100 years ago, there were not a lot of empaths on the planet.
No.
You know, as consciousness and frequency is rising collectively, we're finally getting to a point where it's time for us again. And so we are the empathic Big Bang. We are the ones who are here to help pave the way for the ones coming behind us. You know, there's a quote from the movie Moneyball that says, "The first guy through the wall always gets bloodied." And that is the role. That's me. You know,
Yeah.
that's so many of us, because we didn't have the parents, the teachers, the community, the support structure to, one, even recognize our sensitivities. It was not a thing. It was not a known, you know, way of being,
Right.
let alone give us the tools of how to manage it and to understand what it is. And so there are enough of us who've been around long enough that there's a next generation coming up that has some awareness that is born with the greater level of consciousness, and with parents and community that has set the field that they can grow into. And so the way it usually goes is, you know, what took us 20 years to figure out takes them 2 years, while we sit there and go, damn, that's just not fair. You know?
Yeah.
But
And thank God I did this for them.
yes, yeah. And so they are here to just continue on with this shifting of consciousness, because, you know, my belief is that some number of years, maybe hundreds of years from now, empath is just going to be synonymous with human, because this is where we are all headed, living from this place of full consciousness, full awareness of all of our sensitivities and our connection to all of the different realms of, you know, life and sentient beings, and being able to communicate from this place of our heart and being in our center.
And so, as an empath, how do you not lose faith in what's ahead of us with what's going on around us right now? How do you look at the way society is in this moment, and how do you not say, how the hell am I going to do anything about that? You know?
Yeah, a fair question, and I have two answers that sort of hit opposite ends of the spectrum.
Okay.
One, and this is something that I'm being called to practice at an even deeper level than I have before, and that is to be present in the moment, because it's very easy to get overwhelmed. An example would be when I got divorced for the first time, it was too overwhelming for me to even think about the day. I had to live my life hour by hour and minute by minute, because that's all that I could handle.
Yeah.
And so in a way, it illustrates, like, if you can just stay in the present moment, with what is, and really be present, that keeps us from living in the future and then creating all of the anxiety and the what ifs and the unknowns. So that is one tool. And the other tool is, so while I see presence as being very, kind of the monad, the point in the moment of space time, the other end of that is, now let's back out to the greatest possible perspective, because for me, I find context to be so helpful. And it's one of the things that I really focus on in my empath book, is what is happening at this greatest level of perspective, so that we can locate ourselves inside of that and understand our place and what's happening at a bigger level. Humanity is in a cycle of ascension. We are raising in consciousness. But one of the illustrations that I use is, say, for example, temperature. And if we charted temperature from, let's say February to May, right, in the Northern Hemisphere, we're moving out of winter, we're moving into spring. Is every day warmer than the day before? Absolutely not.
Right.
Especially in the Midwest, we're going to be 30, and then we're going to be 16, and then we're going to be 42, and then 28, and then 55. And, but if you chart, right, it's up and down. But if you chart the trend, it is getting warmer.
Yeah.
And so if you look at it, if you take that same exact model, but you stretch it out over kind of, probably decades or centuries, we look at where we are in our collective consciousness and the experiences in the world, and, the political situation and loss of human rights and the wars that are still happening. We are bouncing up and down like crazy, but we are still trending upwards in this direction. And so we are here to, kind of the 100th monkey effect. If there are enough of us holding that frequency and applying our consciousness and doing our inner work, that creates an entrainment effect on those around us. But it's also important to understand that same dissonance that I was talking about earlier, that's what we're looking at now on the collective level.
Yeah.
Everything that was in shadow before in our collective consciousness, that dissonance is just flushing everything to the surface.
Yeah. I'm a firm believer that there's actually more light now than there has ever been before. And the reason that there's so much darkness and so much ugly out there is because it's fighting tooth and nail to stay. But we're casting more light on it, so it can't hide in the shadows anymore. It's all coming out because we're shining a light on it. And in the human perspective, it's quite honestly, it's scared shitless of losing its life, losing its way of being. So it's just getting louder and louder and louder. And throughout history, the loud has always been the one that seems to get stuff done. So, for us, it's almost like we have to love louder in order to even be heard. But it's conversations like this that I need, that remind me that it's okay to be human. It's okay. I go through these moments where I am so pissed off at politics or pissed off at something that's going on in the world that I'm like constantly in that energy and watching the news and posting on Facebook and social media, and I'm just, and then I stop and I have a conversation like this with somebody and I go, okay, I am okay. Everything's going to be fine. Then I'll even go back and start deleting all that stuff to get that energy out of my field, and then something new will happen to piss me off and I'll go again. But it's getting less and less over time, and I become aware of it much sooner than I used to. So I see that as a positive step. Is there maybe one practice from your book that the listeners could begin today to start to strengthen their energetic boundaries without hardening them, without, seeming like it's just going to be too much?
So to just give a little context for the exercise, as empaths, we are born with a naturally open energy field. It is easy. It's how we're built, if you will, to blend and merge with other people. And so if we don't have any other experience, if we don't know better, if we don't have any different modeling, we pick up on everybody else's stuff. We don't know where we end and the next person begins because we just blend and merge with everybody. We take on their stuff. We think what we're feeling is our own. And so a practice, first of all, to just imagine your container, right? Just depending on where you are in your awakening and your awareness of your own self is, one of the concepts of my book is you and I are one, but we are not the same. And so it's holding the divine dichotomy that in spirit form, the need for boundaries and protection isn't a thing. It's not needed. We are all one and we understand that. But down here in this earth plane, we are all individuations of the Creator. And there is a place, at the highest level, we are all one. Right. And at the working level, the tactical level, if you will, we are individuals and we are not all the same. And we have our own sovereign space. And so just imagining that and tuning into it, however it looks to you, a bubble, a sphere, a cocoon, however your psyche shows you that information, is to tune into it and begin to develop an awareness of it and a relationship with it. And then you can start to receive information from it or tune into its status, right? Is it pretty good right here in the front, but there's nothing in the back, right? Does it look like Swiss cheese all over the place? Is it, I can hold my boundaries pretty firm, except under these circumstances or this person or people like this or this trigger or whatever. And so it is developing that sense, but there's often a mindset shift that comes with it of, do I really deserve this? Is it okay? Do I have the right to occupy my own space?
Yeah.
Yes, you absolutely do.
It's amazing how much people think they don't deserve something, whether it's love or understanding or grace. And some of it may be from trauma in their lives, and who knows, some of it may be from a lack of experience or lack of emotion or lack of love in their lives, and so they come to believe that they're just not deserving. I loved what you said about while we're still the one in the higher consciousness of things, we're individual manifestations of that one consciousness. I think the trick is understanding that it's not just the way you think that is part of the whole. It's everything that's part of the whole, and accepting that.
Yeah, early in my spiritual awakening, I was introduced to the Conversations with God books.
Yeah.
And they just blew my mind.
Yeah.
And usually about once a decade, I go back into them. And so recently I've been going back into them. And, especially in light of, the recent election in the United States, I've really had to work with, the concept of there is no place that God is not.
Yeah.
And be like, oh, are you sure? And so that calls me to my next level of just many, many things.
Yeah. For me, it's we get people saying, well, if there's a God, why would God allow that to happen? Or what kind of God would allow this? Or what kind of God exists in that? And the problem I have with that is you're putting a label on something that's everything. You can't put everything in a box, because God is not some old dude with a beard sitting on a throne up in the clouds dishing out gifts and punishment. That's not, to me, that's not what God is. God is everything. So it's so human to try to find something to blame, as long as it's not me. I'm not responsible for that. And in the long run, it's got to be God, and the truth is, most of the shit that we've dealt with in our lives was human created.
Right. Yeah, that is the one of the hardest journeys, is moving out of this sort of institutionalized victimhood experience into the recognition that we are each responsible for our own creations. And that is some scary responsibility when you really look at just how powerful we are.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to be careful with who's delivering that message, because there are some folks in the spiritual community who almost shifted into a blame game on yourself. Like when you're in an abusive relationship, what have you done to bring that to you? Well, you know what? I was living with an asshole, and that's just the way it is sometimes. And you can't blame me for that person being cruel. I can see.
Yeah, it's a spiritual shaming.
Yes, that's what I'm looking for, spiritual shaming. So you got to be careful who's delivering that message and how it's delivered, because nobody's looking to blame anybody, but looking to accept responsibility for what actually is yours.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what you can control.
Right. Exactly.
In the end, you can only control you.
Yeah. Yep. So I want to talk about your cards for a minute, the empath activation cards. Now, first of all, you are the artist.
I am.
Okay, so every aspect of the front, the back, every aspect of this card is something you created, correct?
Yes.
All right. So what was, first of all, what was that process like when you decided? Did you just have a bunch of art lying around and say, oh, I can make some cool cards? Or did you say, I want to make some cards and I think I'll design them myself?
Yeah. I was ready to write this Oracle deck a year before I actually started it. And I would get locked up, and I was trying to figure out the artwork, because, like, do I find the artist? Does my publisher find the artist? Do I pay the artist? Does my publisher pay the artist?
Yep.
How do the royalties work? Like, I was going round and round, and I couldn't, I was just stuck on that and couldn't move forward. And so I had a reading with a medium that I use, and she's like, well, Steph, you're supposed to do the artwork. And I was like, oh, because I am an artist, but I don't lead with that. And so as soon as she said that, it opened the door, it gave me permission, and I just got this huge download of the art. Like, if you were to take the deck and lay out all 44 cards and look at the images, you would see that every single image has some form of circles or dots.
Okay.
And so those circles and dots are the transmission vehicle of the activation of the, of the whatever is being sent through the card into each person as they look at the image and read the message. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that one, there are a few and that's one of them that I was very inspired by crop circles.
Yeah, that's what it reminded me of. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I had a big list of ideas for each card. and then a sketchbook of just images and flashes of things that would come to me. And so I was in I call it a 3.5 month creation bubble. I did all of this in 3.5 months.
Wow.
And every day I would get up and like, am I going to write today or am I going to paint today? And so they were created in tandem, but they weren't attached to each other in the beginning.
Oh.
It wasn't like, okay, I wrote this message and now what's the image I'm going to paint to go with it?
Right.
I did those processes independently.
Wow.
Until I started getting closer to the end. And so as I got, into maybe 30 something art pieces completed, then I had enough messages that I would start pairing them up.
Yeah.
And my guides would just be like, oh, this is the image that's going to go with this, and this is the image that's going to go with that. So that as I got towards the end, the process slowed down a little bit because I'm like, okay, I've got 8 more messages I need to create and 10 more pieces of art I need to create. So I had to be a little bit more, matching it up and conscious, whereas before I'm just like, I'm just writing and I'm just painting.
Yeah.
And then I'll match them up later.
Yeah.
So
you said that it all kind of came when you were talking to a medium. And this happens a lot with, well, in my family in particular, but with people I know, where you'll be getting messages, you'll be having conversations with a loved one, things will be said and they don't quite hit home. But then you speak to one person, whether it's a medium or you listen to a channel or somebody else gets a message, and it's everything that's already been said, but it takes that moment right there for you to go, yes, that's brilliant.
Yes. Yeah. Or for, in my case, somebody outside of me to give me permission.
Yes.
To paint my own artwork.
Yes. And then you're like, oh my God, that was so obvious.
Right. Exactly.
Why didn't I think of that? I did. Oh, okay. Nice. So now with the cards, how does someone who's got your deck or is going to get your deck, how do they know when a card is working on them beyond just like intellectual insight?
Right. It's always the feeling body, right? Our body, we are incredible receiver transmitters, but a lot of times the receiver part of us has been trained out of us or numbed or dulled or just not developed. And so really it's, you might get shivers, you might get, one of the ways that my system tells me that something is truth is I'll tear up momentarily.
Yeah.
Or you might, any number of physical symptoms or things can happen. And over time you learn that that's your body's way of telling you this or telling you that.
Right.
And so, these are very activational cards. They're very high level. The images are very activational on purpose. And so they can, you can use the deck however you want. You can just pull a card for the day, or if you have something you're sitting with, a decision you want to make, or trying to get some validation, you can do a spread. But I also, let me back up and say, this was not intended. This wasn't in my conscious concept of this deck until I was pretty much close to done writing it, where the 44 cards started to align themselves into 4 groups of 11.
Okay.
Which became these, basically, what am I trying to say? Initiatory paths.
Right.
So if you look at the front of the guidebook, the cards are divided into initiatory path 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so if a person chose, this is like a mystery school in a box where you could actually read through this, and work with the cards as well, from front to back, like a book. And that is kind of your own personal launch sequence into the mysteries of ascending consciousness, because each initiatory path, like the first one is more the 3D level, the human level, and then each level is a little bigger, a little deeper, a little broader, a little higher. until you've got the bigger picture perspective. So this is, there are multiple ways to work with this deck that's very powerful.
I was actually, that kind of leads to my next question, because I was going to ask you, of the four initiatory paths that are in your deck, which path feels the most, I don't know if I want to say urgent, feels the most urgent for the collective right now?
Mm-hmm.
Like, does one path feel a little bit more out front?
Right. Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I'm reminded of Anna Dea Judith's work, if you know who that is.
No.
And she talks about we are collectively moving from the energy of the third chakra to the energy of the fourth chakra, which she characterizes as moving from the love of power to the power of love, which I just absolutely love. And so there's two answers I want to give.
Okay.
One answer is we're working all these paths simultaneously.
Okay.
Right? So when I referred earlier about that evolution, our inner work, our evolution is not linear.
Yeah.
Everything's happening at one time, right? So we're working all of these activational levels at the same time. We're working on our inner child stuff, and then we're up here having peak experiences, and then we're coming back down, and we're doing this, and then we're all over. But the other answer I want to give is we can only progress so high. Let me say that differently. The ability for us to ascend or progress in this direction is directly related to our ability to go and process in this direction, right? So there's this mirroring effect of, like a tree, right? If you were magically able to uproot any tree, their root system is going to be as deep and broad and wide as their canopy is tall and broad above the ground. And so when we are willing to do our shadow work, to go into the unconscious pieces, to look at our triggers, to do our inner work and healing, that creates the stability in the foundation so that we can go higher and broader. Otherwise, if we don't do the deeper work, then the tree just falls over because it gets top heavy.
Yeah. And that deeper work, that root system that you're talking about, is truly what stabilizes us, what keeps us strong, keeps us upright, and helps us, I mean, to maintain the metaphor, it helps us weather every storm, you know? Yeah. So now, if someone is new to the concept of shedding some of the shoulds in their life to look at what some of the coulds may be, is there a way your card deck would help them in some way?
It can give a perspective of what's possible.
Okay.
What's happening in the bigger picture, because I think that's something that happens to so many of us, especially when we just don't have the practice of being in those spaces, is we get tunnel vision, and our focus and our scope becomes very narrow and very right here in front of us, which is what happens when we are in crisis mode, right?
Yeah.
Or when we are just like, I got to figure out how to eat, where to live, pay the bills. When we're in that space, it is hard to look at the bigger picture and hard to imagine these things that can feel more conceptual when you're like, listen, I don't give a shit about my spiritual relationship with so and so. I don't know how I'm going to get through the rest of this month.
Right.
And that is a real experience for a lot of people. But if you're in a space where you can, for a moment at least, allow yourself to open up to the bigger picture of what's happening, again, for me, that context is so very helpful and supportive, because it gives you that perspective, and you don't feel so isolated. You're like, I'm just this thing over here by myself. Nobody has a similar experience. And then all of a sudden you look at the bigger picture and you're like, oh, there I am.
Yeah.
And this is how I relate to everything else.
Yeah. Okay. So living beyond the shoulds, like really finding that place where you can take your first step on that path of shedding some of the shoulds and embracing some of the coulds with the space that you've created. What does it mean to you to live as an embodied could type of person?
I appreciate that term because it's very easy, very seductive, and also ingrained that we go right up here.
Yes.
With everything, right? So it can be this place of living in our head. Oh, I have this dream, or even a fantasy, or just an illusion, where we're telling ourselves this is the life that we're living because we're living from here up.
Yeah.
So to be embodied means you're not just conceptualizing it, you're not just thinking about it or pushing it into the future or hoping or telling yourself that's what's happening when it's not really what's happening. You're living it, you're bringing it into your body. You're again, back to Anna Day of Judas, she talks about, there's two directions of energy, right? Upwards and downwards through our chakra system. And the downward direction is the manifesting direction. So when we bring something into form, it starts as a vision, right? It's the field of plenty where absolutely everything is possible.
Yep.
But you cannot manifest if you're trying to bring it all through together at the same time with everything, right? So manifesting is actually a process of limiting. It is a process of saying no and being very specific about what you say yes to, so that as you bring it through and visualize it, begin to talk about it and create it and generate it and bring it into form, you have to be specific and clear about what it is that you want.
Yeah. We've lived an example of that. I've actually heard my wife say, I just want somebody to send me a check in the mail out of frustration. And then a week later, we got a check for like $1.32 from some crazy civil lawsuit from something that neither of us even knew was happening. Like, shit, we should have been a little more specific and added a few zeros.
Yeah.
So for someone who's feeling trepidation, I guess, to step into living their coulds, what would you offer as the smallest, most compassionate first step for them?
Yeah. Love yourself. And it may sound so trite, and it may be like, oh man, I've heard that. I don't, but it is a continual daily journey for me personally, and I'm sure many people. What does that kindness look like? That permission, right? So loving yourself is saying you did what you had to do. You lived your life from your shoulds, and that's okay. You didn't do anything wrong, but now that's not working for you. And so it's okay. What, make space for what wants to come through. And maybe you don't even know what that is yet. Sometimes you have to start with what you don't want to be able to help you get to what you do want. But it's being in that space of just radical self-love, so that we're not beating ourselves up and making ourselves wrong for how we used to live our lives. It's recognizing that this served a purpose and it doesn't serve a purpose anymore. So now, how can I continue to hold myself in love as I move towards what I want instead of away from what I don't want?
Yeah. And how can I be open to my highest good even when I don't know what that is right now? We hear that a lot in the spiritual community, where we'll pray for somebody's highest and greatest good instead of praying for a specific, like a friend's in the hospital or something like that. We don't we want them to get better. We want them to heal, but we also want what's best for them. So it's accepting that you don't know what your highest and greatest good may be at this moment, but being open to receiving it anyway, because you deserve it. And that goes back to your loving yourself. Love yourself enough to know you're deserving. Yeah. Oh, Stephanie, this was a lot of fun. I love this conversation. I want to give you an opportunity to share some stuff with us. Where can we get your book? Where can we get your cards? Do you have any workshops coming up? Anything like that?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So if you go to bluestartemple.org, that is my website. And so you can order the Evolutionary Empath Activation cards, and then my other books, multi-author books that I'm a part of. If you order from me, you'll get a signed copy with a personalized inscription, if that's meaningful to you. Otherwise, I'm not attached to, if you order it from somebody else, there's also an audiobook version available. I do have, for people who might be in the local area, I'm co-creating with a friend of mine in Springfield, Illinois, a workshop called The Empath and the Warrior. And so it's an integration and alchemization of these empath and warrior energies. But it's essentially masculine and feminine through the archetypes of the empath. So that is September 5th and 6th. And you are welcome to subscribe to my newsletter. I encourage you to do that, because that's the best way to stay in touch with offerings that I have, workshops coming up, products, live stuff, online stuff, all of those things.
And they can do that at Blue Star Temple?
BlueStarTemple.org.
Okay, fantastic. Oh, Stephanie, thank you for sharing your wisdom, your journey, and your light. What you've given us today is more than a conversation. It's a mirror. For everyone listening, this is your invitation to notice where the word should still lives in your body, and to ask what new possibility could take its place if you set it down. As empaths, sensitives, and soulful beings, our depth is not a burden. It's a compass that points toward our truest life. When we tend to that gift that's within us with the care and the reverence that it deserves, we stop living by someone else's map, and begin charting our own course. So may each of you walk forward from this moment a little lighter, a little braver, and a little more willing to say yes to the coulds that are waiting for you. This has been Aligned AF, and I'm Yahweh. Well, thanks for hanging out with me today. If this episode spoke to you at all, share it with a friend or someone who needs it. You can also leave a review or connect with me online. You can find Aligned AF on YouTube, Facebook, your favorite podcast channel, or at alignedaf.org. And if you want to reach out directly, you can email me at alignedafpodcast@gmail.com. So until next time, stay aligned AF.